I cannot tell you how much Gideon and Ava's story has touched my heart.
Oh, thank you.
I feel there's something so compelling about seeing two characters that are so broken but working so hard to create a functional relationship together. I guess my first question is, I'm wondering, can you tell us a bit about your inspiration for Gideon and Ava and the series as a whole?
Well, you know, it really started with 7 Years to Sin, which is a historical novel of mine that I wrote back in 2010 and released in 2011. And, you know, that story follows a couple, you know, the heroine was a survivor of child abuse, and the hero, you know, was emotionally and mentally abused in his home by his stepfather. And so you have these two really damaged people trying to have a relationship. But in that book, you know, what we had was, that was like a real point of connection for them. You know, they felt like, I found my soulmate because we have this in common, and that's what makes us perfect for each other. But, you know, in doing research for it, you know, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, I'm like, that's actually not how it works. You know, these people, you know, who are coming into a relationship with that kind of baggage have usually come up with different coping mechanisms that trigger the other person in a really negative way. And as much as they want to be together, it's a lot of work, you know? And I'm like, I want to write that story. I want to do justice to the story. I obviously can't stop and rewrite 7 Years to Sin because it's under deadline and I'm 3/4 of the way done with it. Also, I mean, the traditional romance format is you have one couple, one book. And I knew that if I was really going to get into that dynamic, you know, that dynamic of trying to have, you know, a functional romantic relationship when you personally feel as if you are dysfunctional, was going to take more than one book, you know? I mean, there was really no way to constrain it that way. So after I finished 7 Years to Sin, I started, you know, Bared to You. And so readers actually who read both books see a lot of similarities because the characters look alike and they have similar circumstances. And that's really because when I started Crossfire, I was still in 7 Years to Sin. So in my head, I had Jessica and Alistair, and I kind of transplanted them to modern day New York. And then as I wrote the story, they took over and they became Gideon and Ava, and completely separate, you know, characters that are entirely unique to themselves.
Right. Well, I guess there's a draw right now to these dominant, controlling alpha male characters in contemporary women's fiction and romance, and I guess there's like these trends right now. Our readers at this point, they are dying to know, is there anything you can tell us about the rest of the series at this point?
Yes, sure. And I mean, a really, you know, concise way to look at it is Bared to You, Reflected in You, and the entire first half of Entwined with You are Ava's story. When you look at it, really the things that they work out, the things that they resolve are all of Ava's issues. You know, she's dealing with, you know, confrontations with her parents and revealing secrets, and, you know, the nightmare from her past, and all of those things are really addressed in the first 2.5 books. So when you're looking at an equal relationship between two people and you've got a 5-book series, what do you expect out of the next 2.5 books? You expect them to be Gideon's story, and that's exactly right. You know, that's what we're going to see. Ava's in a really strong place when you get to the end of Entwined with You. You know, she's learned a lot of hard lessons. She's come to trust. I mean, Gideon made a huge sacrifice for her at the end of Reflected in You. And when somebody loves you enough to make that kind of sacrifice, it's very hard to be insecure anymore. You know, it's very hard to be insecure in the relationship. So and she's really the anchor for their romance. So when she's solid and stable, he's much more solid and stable. And that's really where they needed to be in order for them to really tackle Gideon's issues. So that's what we're going to see moving forward in the next 2 books is, you know, we're going to get Gideon, you know, squared away, you know, where he needs to be, so that when we get to the end, we can trust that these 2 people have done what they need to do to be together forever.
I have to tell you, I cannot wait for them. I love what you've done with the story so far, and from everything you're saying, it just sounds like it's going to be phenomenal from this point forward. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
I heard that you were a former Russian linguist for the U.S. Army, and I'm just wondering, how did you go from that to becoming one of the hottest selling authors in the world?
Yeah, and that's always the assumption, I think, that, you know, I moved from being a Russian linguist into writing. But, you know, the first time that I said that I was going to be a romance novelist, I was 12 years old. Yeah, I had just finished my first romance novel, and, you know, I got to the end, and I'm like, oh, I didn't want it to end. You know, I want to go back to the beginning and read all over again. And I'm like, you know, I want to do that. I want to do that for somebody. You know, I want to write a book where they get to the end and they wish it hadn't ended, and that they love it and they're connected to it. And I just so happened to have an essay due in class that, you know, that same time period where they were like, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a romance novelist. Between then, you know, between 12 years old to where I am right now, I like to think that I was still on that same road to becoming a novelist. And, you know, all of the little jobs that I did on the end and the big jobs, like being in the military, are just kind of scenic detours, you know, and they add flavor to my books. I mean, they give me points of reference and fun things to share and build into my novels. And so, I mean, really, being a romance novelist was always the be-all, end-all for me.
That is such a wonderful story. Well, thank you so much for your time and your answers. I know that many of our readers are going to be so excited to hear what you have to say, and we can't wait for your new book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I was able to catch up with you and that we were able to do this. It was a lot of fun.